S&P 500 inclusion. A, do we think it's happening? B, do we think the run is because of the anticipation of it happening? C, how important is it to get in on September 6th versus in 2025? Arnie, what's your take on this?
Well, entering the S&P 500, I think it is more a thing that matters for us to shareholders because we have been dreaming this so much for a long time since we started having like 4 quarters of gap earnings. We are here. Come on, let's get in. Come on, let's get in. And now many quarters have passed. I think 7, 8. So it's like a lot now. Now, does it really change anything for the company? Not really operationally, but it does affect the visibility that the company could get. So there is some business value to be unlocked because when they present themselves to a potential customer, it's like, oh, we are not that meme, unprofitable, trash consulting company that people describe us with. We are a pristine S&P 500. So we belong to the cluster of the biggest and most important 500 institutions in the US, while also being crazy profitable, while accelerating growth. So that already puts clients in a mind of, oh, these guys are actually serious. Now, for shareholders, this would mean if we get accepted finally, probably a big jump short term, like it happened essentially for Airbnb, Blackstone, more recently Supermicro computers. So it's like typically when you have the announcement, you have some more price action, people buying because, oh, if Palantir will enter the S&P 500, I need to buy it before it actually enters so that I can front run the institutions that will have to buy. Now, does it really change the dynamic of the story? I think not really, but we need to think one thing always when we deal with Palantir right now. A few months ago, I described something like the AI hype can become real. And what I mean with that is what previously was not affecting Palantir when Palantir became popular as a meme. That was, oh, you're popular, but you can't transform that audience into business value, into money for the company. But now Palantir has the way to capture a high interest. So whatever additional positive feedback loop of information creates further feedback loop for the business. So that becomes like a free marketing. So if Palantir keeps doing well and it gets the recognitions that it deserves, that becomes a free marketing for the company. Once you have free marketing for the company, you can grow more, you can expand margins more, and reiterating. And like it or not, we are a small part of this engine that helps amplify the stuff Palantir does. So a butterfly effect coming.
Vince, what are your thoughts on S&P potential inclusion?
Well, again, it's so interesting to look back at history that maybe a year ago we were all like, okay, what's the catalyst for Palantir? What does Palantir stock need to continue to rally? And it seems like all Palantir stock needed to rally was Palantir. And they have been like, it's so nice that the stock is rallying because the company is doing good and it's not rallying because, S&P 500 inclusion or interest rate cuts or whatever. Like we're actually going up because we deserve to be going up. So to be honest, I don't care anymore if we're included. Like it's going to happen sooner or later, but we are up 96% or something year over year without S&P 500. And sure, we get a little bit of bump, but the stock price is mainly driven by what it actually should be driven by, which is the company performance. And I'm very happy with that.
Amir, your thoughts on S&P 500 and if it matters or it doesn't, like Vince said?
Last rebalancing, I think a lot of people were expecting to see Palantir join in on the S&P 500, but that's when we just hit 4 quarters of operational profitability. I mean, we have now 5 quarters of operational profitability and 6 quarters of net profitability. So I understand that we weren't included the last time if the criteria is 4 quarters. I don't know what the criteria is, what the board looks at when they decide who's included, who isn't. But I also tried to look at the implications in terms of inflows by being included in the S&P 500. And let me tell you, it's a real rabbit hole to try to calculate what it would do for the enterprise value of the company just being included. And after a few hours, I came to the realization that it doesn't really matter besides serving as a short-term catalyst for the stock price. And over time, the stock will trade in line with intrinsic value with or without inclusion. So I decided to just not care about it. So I'm more in line with Vince there.
Yeah, I agree. If the stock was struggling, then like that would be a catalyst. But it's very hard if the stock's up 90% year to date to feel like we need to get into the S&P 500. I'm sure it would create more stability from an institutional side, but it's not like it's super, super exciting. Matt, any thoughts on S&P 500?
Yeah, I think everyone hit some pretty good topics there. I think the thing that I didn't hear, though, was I think it's going to help provide a floor and really reduce the volatility from a downside perspective. Like things like the massive drop that we kind of saw for no reason, going from like, what was it, 26 or 27 all the way down to 21. I mean, granted, the rest of the market dropped 8-10%, but I mean, that was like a 30-35% drop in a matter of a couple of days, and it just didn't make sense. So I think with it being more aligned with the S&P 500 and being included in the S&P 500, I think it'll remove some of that alpha to the downside and would really help folks with a longer term time horizon that are, I guess, a little bit more skittish. And I think it will open it up to a new range of investors. I think there's a lot of folks out there that are fearful of investing in companies that aren't necessarily in the S&P 500. They look for that stability. They look for companies that have been profitable for 4 quarters, and it might not come up on their radar unless it's actually inclusive of the S&P 500. And so included in the S&P 500, I mean. So I think that's just something that would help from, I guess, transitioning us from what many folks have probably called a meme stock back in 2021 to a company now that's actually demonstrating its value and growing its presence, not only just in the tech space, but also the future potentially for AI. And then lastly, can be considered something like a staple in the S&P 500. I think that would allow us to see a new segment of investor that we have yet really to tap into.
Do you think that if the inclusion happens, that would trigger a lot of comparison between Palantir and the existing big techs, meaning that there would be more discussion of, can this company actually become one of another behemoth?
I think that's what's already happening, and I think that's why we're starting to see kind of a floor in the price.
Amir, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that if they were to be included today, they would be in the top 150 by weighting, which would mean around like 0.11, 0.12% weighting. And if you then consider all the $1 trillion that has like if you distribute the total amount of money that's divided across all the different S&P 500 indices, like if you just take 0.12% of that, like it would mean a lot of inflows. But even though you consider that, it would make like X amount of billions to Palantir's market cap. But it's not like every company in the S&P below the top 150 is like overvalued by X amount of billions. So what I mean is, when I started doing these calculations about the inflows, the rebalancing and all that stuff, I came to the conclusion that, well, it's not like these companies have a premium just because they're in the S&P 500. Like it reverts to the intrinsic value regardless. So short term, they will see some inflows, but I don't think it does a lot for valuation wise over like a period after like a year. I think it all normalizes.
Consider stocks, companies like Airbnb, Tesla don't really gain any business momentum more from entering in the index or not. I think for Palantir, you can have better credentials just by presenting yourself as, by the way, we are one of the top 150 companies belonging in the best index in the world. But I mentioned Airbnb and Tesla because those are two cases where we entered in the S&P 500. Yay! And now they're both down. In the case of Tesla, very down. So it could be that potentially also the opposite could happen, where when you make the comparison between, what Palantir is actually trading with in terms of multiples compared with the overall index, there could even happen the opposite direction, that maybe we have like a spike for the, new money coming in, and then CFA's analysts say, you know what? No. Compared with Microsoft, it's too expensive. Compared with all the other, Salesforce, ServiceNow, this company is too expensive. So it's a risk worth keeping in mind.